Welcome to a place far removed from the familiar hum of the world. Tonight, you will walk down a path that few return from. Not because it is dangerous, but because once you've entered, you may not want to leave. What you are about to hear is a gentle descent into a quiet horror, soft enough to sleep to, dark enough to make your dreams just a little unsettled. So take a breath. Release the weight of the day. Because the night is long, and the house you're about to visit has been waiting for a very, very long time. This is the story of a long, peculiar night. A night when a traveler wandered far from the comforts of roads and towns, and stepped into a quiet horror that would mark them forever. The events took place long ago, though the house still stands if one knows where to look. And sometimes, on windless nights, the pines still whisper the name of the traveler who walked too far into the darkness. The traveler entered the forest just before dusk, following a narrow path that cut deep into ancient pines. The trees towered overhead, their branches weaving together to shut out the sky. No birds sang, no insects hummed. The silence was so complete that the traveler could hear their own heartbeat echoing in their ears. The deeper they walked, the stranger the forest became. A faint mist curled around their steps, sliding across the ground like something alive. The air grew colder, thinner, as though the forest was quietly inhaling each breath the traveler released. Still, they continued on. They didn't know why. They only felt that they were being drawn forward by something unseen, something patient, something that had been waiting a very long time. At last, through the shroud of trees and fog, the traveler saw it, a house, tall, crooked, a silhouette of leaning beams and sagging wood, outlined by the pallid glow of a moon that hadn't been in the sky moments before. The traveler approached the house cautiously. Its windows were dark except for one on the second floor, a faint amber flicker, like the last ember of a dying fire. It wasn't warm or welcoming. It felt more like an eye watching them approach. The porch groaned as the traveler stepped onto it. Not the usual creak of tired wood. A softer, lower sound, almost a sigh, as if the house was exhaling in relief. When the traveler touched the door, the wood was strangely warm, alive, almost. They meant to knock but didn't have the chance. The door opened on its own, slowly, soundlessly, as though the house had been expecting them. Inside, the house smelled of dust, weathered wood, and something faintly metallic like rain striking old iron. Candles burned along the walls, their flames perfectly still, unmoving despite the draft that should have been there. Portraits lined the hallway, their faces faded into pale smudges, yet their eyes, even blurred, seemed to follow the traveler's movement. At the end of the foyer stood a staircase that wound upward into thick, unnatural darkness. And beneath that darkness, from somewhere above, came the steady, deliberate sound of footsteps, slow, measured, pacing, as if someone on the upper floor had been walking back and forth for a very long time. The traveler ascended the stairs, every step sounding far louder than it should. At the top, a long hallway stretched forward, its wooden boards warped, like the spine of some ancient creature. Every door was closed except the one at the very end. A sliver of warm light glowed beneath it, not welcoming, just waiting. The traveler pushed it open. Inside was a small bedroom, strangely well preserved. A narrow bed, a writing desk cluttered with papers, a single candle burning beside them, and above the bed, a portrait of a child. The traveler froze. The child's face was unmistakable, the same eyes, the same quiet expression, even the same small scar at the edge of the lip, a scar the traveler themselves bore and had never known the origin of. The painted child stared outward, not smiling, not frowning, expectant, as though the traveler was late for a long-awaited return. Drawn to the desk, the traveler examined the papers. Most were covered in notes written in a dark, heavy ink, the lines jagged and frantic. One page lay neatly on top. The handwriting was clearer, more familiar. It read, If you are reading this, you have come back. The traveler didn't understand. But before they could read further, a faint sound rose from beneath the floorboards. A whisper, low, soft, almost pleading. The traveler knelt, pressing an ear to the wooden planks. For a moment, nothing. Then the whisper came again, stronger now, clearer, calling a name, the traveler's name. Not angrily, not urgently, but gently, like a voice long forgotten yet deeply familiar. The boards beneath their hands felt warm, pulsing, alive. And before the traveler could stand, before they could question what exactly was whispering beneath the floor, the door behind them slowly closed on its own. The traveler remained very still as the door latched shut behind them with a dull final click. The whispering beneath the floor faded into a soft murmur, like someone talking in their sleep on the other side of a thin wall. The room itself seemed to settle, the air growing warmer, almost heavy. The traveler turned back to the desk. Among the scattered papers was a small drawer, simple, wooden, with a tarnished metal handle. They tugged it gently, locked, but as their fingers brushed the handle, the whisper beneath the floorboards grew louder. Not words now, just a sound. A long drawn-out sigh, like the exhale of something that had been waiting for a very long time. The traveler stepped back. The floorboards beneath their feet were warmer now, warmer than any wood should be. Whatever was beneath them was awake. Needing to gather their thoughts, the traveler left the room behind. The hallway outside was dimmer than before. The candle flames along the walls burned lower, casting long trembling shadows that stretched like reaching fingers across the floor. The portraits that lined the hall were less faded now, human shapes taking on clearer form, faces emerging where only smudges had been. The traveler paused beside one of them. It depicted a tall woman with hollow cheeks and a gaze so sharp it seemed to cut through the dim light. Her lips were parted, as though she were whispering something the moment the paint had dried. The traveler leaned closer. The woman's eyes, dull brown, lifeless, shifted. Not a full movement, not a turn, just a flicker. A twitch of recognition. The traveler stumbled back, heart pounding, but the portrait remained still, the painted eyes once again frozen. From the far end of the hallway came a faint creak, like a door slowly opening on rusted hinges, but all the doors were closed. Every one, except the one leading to the staircase descending into the lower floor. The traveler approached the stairwell. A cold draft seeped upward, smelling faintly of earth and something older than rot. The house groaned overhead, the long, slow complaint of ancient beams shifting under invisible weight. Step by step, the traveler descended. The wooden treads felt softer here, as though worn down by countless footsteps that should not have existed. Halfway down the stairs, they paused. Something moved in the darkness below. Not quickly, not aggressively, just enough to make the shadows stir. The traveler waited, listened. Nothing. The silence in the lower floor felt deeper than any silence before, a silence so dense it seemed to swallow the soft rhythm of breathing. Finally, their feet touched the bottom step. A corridor stretched before them, long and narrow, lit only by a single candle burning at the far end. Its flame was nearly motionless, as though the air itself refused to shift around it. The traveler walked slowly, their footsteps muffled by the thick dust carpeting the floor. As they approached the candle, a door beside it came into view. It was different from all the others in the house, heavier, reinforced with iron bands. Scratches marked the lower half-long jagged marks, as though something with claws had fought to get out, or fought desperately to get in. The traveler leaned closer. The scratches were deep, so deep that splinters had been torn clean away. They placed their hand against the cold iron band. For a moment, nothing. Then, from the other side of the door, they felt it. A faint vibration. A slow, steady rhythm. A heartbeat. The traveler pulled their hand back, but the heartbeat continued, thudding gently against the wood and metal. Not fast, not frantic, just waiting. Chapter 10. The Voice in the Walls. The traveler stepped back, breath quickening. At that moment, the candle flame flickered, for the first time since they had arrived. A draft slid through the corridor, cold, sharp, carrying with it a whisper. This one did not come from beneath the floorboards or behind the door. This whisper moved along the walls, sliding through the wooden beams like a thin stream of air passing through hollow bones. The voice was soft. Soft enough to be mistaken for wind, but the house was sealed tight. No wind could move through it. The traveler held still, listening. The whisper grew clearer, more distinct. A faint sentence spoken repeatedly, almost tenderly. You left, but you came back. Another whisper followed, this one deeper, heavier, layered like several voices speaking at once. We remember you. The house creaked as though shifting closer. The heartbeat behind the iron door grew louder. And the candle flame, for the first time, leaned toward the traveler as if drawn by an unseen breath. The traveler backed away from the iron-banded door, their pulse matching the heavy thud from the other side. As they retreated, they noticed a door across the corridor, a plain wooden one, unmarked, without scratches or locks. It stood slightly ajar, as if waiting for them and them alone. Despite the growing dread curling in their stomach, the traveler reached for it. The hinges gave no sound as the door swung open into a small room, barely touched by time. Inside was a simple rocking chair, a thin blanket draped over it. The chair moved gently, not the wide arc of a rocking motion, but a soft rhythmic sway, as though someone had just left it a moment before the traveler arrived. On the floor lay a single object, a child's wooden toy block. Its painted letter, though faded, was unmistakable, the first letter of the traveler's name. The rocking chair swayed again, slow, measured, in time with a breath that was no longer present. The traveler stepped back, closing the door quietly before the chair could fall still. Chapter 12. The handprint on the wall. Returning to the corridor, the traveler noticed something they were certain had not been there before. A handprint, pressed into the dust on the wall near the stairs. Small, delicate, the size of a child's hand. The outline was crisp, fresh, as though placed only seconds earlier. The traveler reached toward it, not touching, just observing. The shape was familiar, too familiar, and their breath caught in their throat. Before they could move away, a soft tapping sound echoed from somewhere above. One tap, a pause, then another, and another. A slow, steady pattern, not from footsteps, not from creaking beams. It was as if someone were knocking softly on the walls from the inside. Chapter 13. The return to the foyer, unease growing. The traveler moved quickly toward the staircase, leading back up to the foyer. The house felt different now, warmer, as if it had fully awakened. The once silent walls now seemed to hum with a barely perceptible vibration, like a distant choir murmuring beneath the traveler's feet. As they reached the foyer, the candles lining the walls burned brighter than when they had first entered. Their flames stretched upward, thin and tall, as if pulled by invisible strings. But the most unsettling change was the portraits. They were clearer than ever. The faces were no longer blurred or fading. They were sharp, distinct, lifelike. And their eyes, dozens of them, followed the traveler with unmistakable intention. One portrait in particular caught the traveler's attention. A man with a stern jaw, deep-set eyes, and a faint scar across his cheek. The traveler froze. They recognized the scar. It matched the scar they themselves bore. The portrait's expression seemed almost disappointed, as if the house had expected more from them. Chapter 14. The door to the parlor. To break the stare of the many eyes watching them, the traveler pushed forward into the next room, the parlor. The door creaked open, revealing a space filled with dust and long-forgotten furniture draped in pale sheets. A fireplace sat cold and empty, yet soot stains, fresh as morning ink, ran down the inner bricks. The traveler stepped inside. As they did, The door behind them swung shut with a firm snap. On the floor, stretching out in a line toward the fireplace, was a trail of footprints. Small ones, bare, with faint outlines of dirt and something darker pressed into the fibers of the rug. The footprints stopped right at the hearth, as if the unseen child had stepped into the fireplace itself. The traveler knelt, peering inside. Nothing. Only darkness and cold bricks. But the moment they leaned closer, the faintest whisper rose from the chimney, a voice drifting down, soft as falling ash. "Don't leave again." The traveler staggered back, heart pounding. Chapter 15. The mirror that wasn't a mirror turning away from the fireplace. The traveler noticed a tall standing mirror in the corner of the parlor. Its frame was carved with twisting vines and strange, unsettling symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The mirror's surface was fogged, as though someone had breathed across it moments ago. When the traveler wiped it clean, their reflection did not move. They blinked. The reflection did not. They stepped back. The reflection remained still, watching with an expression that did not belong on the traveler's face. Something in the glass shifted, a dark shape passing behind the reflection, like a figure walking in a hallway that did not exist in this room. The traveler turned. No one. Only empty furniture and a cold hearth. When they looked back to the mirror, the reflection had changed. Now the child, the very same child from the portrait upstairs, stood beside the reflection, their small hand resting on the reflection's arm. But there was no child in the room. Only in the glass, the reflection smiled. A thin, unnatural smile. The traveler did not feel. And then, very slowly, the reflection lifted its hand as if to knock from the other side of the mirror. The traveler stood frozen as the reflection's hand rose toward the glass. A single tap sounded, soft, hollow, as though coming from deep inside the mirror rather than its surface. Then another, and another. Each tap sending a faint ripple across the reflection's features, distorting the smile into something stretched and unnatural. The child's reflection did not move. They only stared wide-eyed, expression unreadable, hand still resting on the reflection's arm. But then, the mirror fogged over again, this time from the inside. The traveler watched in horror as breath marks appeared from behind the glass, each exhale slow and deliberate, as though something was leaning in closer to watch them. Finally, the fog thickened until the reflection was completely obscured. A long, low sigh drifted from the glass, a sound that did not belong in any mirror. The traveler backed away, heart pounding. The floor beneath them creaked as though someone else was stepping backward with them. When they reached the far wall and dared a final glance, the mirror stood still. The fog had faded. Their reflection was normal again. But the child was gone. The traveler slipped out of the parlor and back into the foyer, seeking any place that did not breathe or whisper or watch. But the change in the house was unmistakable now. The silence, once thick and heavy, had shifted. It now held a pulse, a rhythm, as though the house itself had begun to breathe. At the far end of the foyer stood an old grandfather clock. When the traveler entered the house earlier, the clock had been still, its pendulum unmoving, its face frozen, its hands rusted in place. Now the pendulum swung gently, smoothly, with no sound. The clock's hands began to turn. Slowly at first, then with unnatural speed, spinning in a full circle over and over, as though time inside the house were looping in on itself. Just as suddenly, the hands stopped, snapping into place toward a single time. 3:03 a.m. A soft click echoed from within the clock. Then a second click. Then a third. In a slow, steady rhythm, like footsteps descending from inside the clock, even though the doors remained shut. Refusing to look deeper into the impossible clock, the traveler turned away and climbed the staircase toward the upper level. The faint tapping they had heard earlier now grew clearer, a steady beat coming from somewhere down the hall. The portraits lining the walls watched silently as the traveler passed, their eyes following with unnerving clarity. At the far end of the corridor was a door they had not noticed before. It was not one of the faded, aged doors that had belonged to the house for decades or centuries. This door was new, clean, white, almost glowing against the darkness around it. A soft sound came from within, a rhythmic rustle, like pages turning. The traveler reached for the handle. Cold metal met their skin, sending a shiver down their arm. When the door opened, the room beyond was startlingly plain. A table, a chair, a single lamp casting a pale circle of light, and on the table lay a book. A thick one, leather-bound, old, its pages turned on their own, fluttering gently as though an unseen reader were skimming them. When the pages stopped, a faint impression appeared across the open sheet, letters forming slowly, like ink rising from the paper instead of sinking into it. The traveler leaned closer to read the words etched upon the page. The page read, "The house remembers all who belong to it." Below that sentence was a list of names. Dozens at first, then hundreds. A catalog of individuals whose fates were tied to the house in some way. Some names were centuries old, some decades, some recent. The traveler turned the page, more names, and more, until finally they reached the last page. Only one name was written there, their own, not in ink, but carved into the page itself, as though the book had gouged it through the paper with invisible claws. A chill ran up the traveler's spine. As they reached out toward the carved letters, the lamp on the table flickered, casting long shadows across the room. From the hallway, just outside the door, the soft patter of bare feet began again. Slow, careful, approaching the room. The traveler turned. The door closed itself. The footsteps stopped just outside, then silence. Suddenly, the lamp flickered again, once, twice, then went out completely, plunging the room into thick darkness. The traveler's breath quickened. They reached out blindly, hands brushing the table, the book, the chair. Then, a sound. The faintest creak of the new white door slowly opening. Cold air drifted into the room. Not the natural cold of night. This chill was different. Heavy, purposeful, like the presence of something that had been waiting in the dark for a long time. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, small, thin. A child, but not the child from the mirror. This one was different, their features obscured by shadow so deep it swallowed the light around them. The traveler could not see their face, only the faint outline of a small hand reaching forward, as if to touch the air between them. The hand trembled, not with fear, but with longing. And from the darkness, the child whispered, a voice soft as sleep, fragile as dusk, "You shouldn't have left." The traveler stood motionless, frozen between fear and disbelief as the small trembling hand hovered in the darkness before them. The child's outline quivered, as though their entire form was barely holding together, flickering at the edges like a candle flame in a draftless room. The voice came again, soft, knowing. "You left us," it whispered. "You left me." The traveler took a single step back. The floor groaned underfoot, the sound stretching unnaturally long, as if echoing down a tunnel of hollow wood. The child lowered their hand. Their head tilted slightly, a movement too slow, too deliberate. When they spoke again, the voice was layered, more than one whisper speaking at the same time, overlapping like memories bleeding together. "The house followed you. Even when you forgot." The traveler shuddered. Forgot what? Forgot who? But before they could speak, before they could form a single word, the child stepped backward into the hall and vanished. Not into shadow, but into nothing. The traveler stumbled into the corridor, searching for any sign of the small figure. But the hallway was not the same hallway they had walked through before. The floorboards were darker, the wood swollen and warped, as if soaked in years of moisture that had never been allowed to dry. The portraits on the walls were no longer faded, nor merely watching. They followed. As the traveler passed, the eyes in the portraits tracked their every movement, some with sorrow, others with fury, and a few with hollow longing. One portrait in particular drew the traveler's gaze, A face they recognized, with chilling clarity. The same child who had just stood in the doorway. Younger, smiling faintly, alive. A family stood behind the child. A mother, a father, and one more figure whose face was scratched out, viciously, as though by fingernails. The traveler leaned closer. The scratched-out figure was about the same height they themselves had been as a child. The house groaned overhead, a long, low complaint that rattled dust from the beams. The traveler approached the staircase, the same one leading down to the foyer. But the foyer was gone. Where it should have been was only more hallway, stretching into impossible distance, walls bending subtly, like ribs in the chest of something that breathed. Behind the traveler, the door they had come through closed softly, not slammed, not clicked, just closed, as though guided by a gentle hand. The house no longer seemed indifferent. It watched, it waited, it remembered. A low hum traveled beneath the floorboards, vibrating upward into the traveler's bones. Not a sound exactly, more like a shared heartbeat. The house's heartbeat, the traveler's heartbeat, beating together in slow rhythm. At the end of the distorted hallway stood a door the traveler had not seen before. Heavy, dark, bound in rusted iron, the same style as the scratched door on the lower floor, but older, much older. A faint light flickered underneath it, a deep red glow that pulsed with the rhythm of the house's breathing. The traveler approached slowly, each step stirring whispers from the walls. Not words, just sounds, soft, trembling breaths, as though the house was struggling to contain something behind the door. When the traveler reached out and touched the handle, a jolt of cold shot up their arm, freezing them in place. The whispers stopped. Everything stopped. The house fell silent. Utterly, completely silent. Then, from the other side of the door, came a single knock, slow, deliberate, waiting to be answered. The traveler hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. Their breath fogged in the air, as the temperature around them dropped sharply. The walls seemed to lean inward, as though listening, as though eager to hear the traveler's response. Then came the voice, the same soft voice from before, the same layered whisper that felt too familiar. "You left me behind." The traveler's heart thumped painfully in their chest. Memories long buried, pressed against the edges of consciousness. Fragmented images, half-formed feelings, shadows of a childhood blurred by time. A room, a crying child, a door slamming shut. Running footsteps, darkness, a voice calling their name, asking not to be left alone. The traveler stumbled backward. The memories slipped away like water through fingers. But the pain in their chest remained. The voice spoke again, this time with unmistakable sorrow. "I waited for you." Then the knock came again, soft, desperate, hopeful. Unable to turn away, unable to move, the traveler reached for the handle. Their hand shook violently as their fingers closed around it, cold metal biting into their skin. They turned it. Slowly, the latch clicked, and the door opened inward with a long, trembling creak. A breath of warm air rushed out, carrying a scent the traveler had not smelled in years. Old books, dust, and something faintly sweet like childhood memories rotting slowly in the dark. A small shape stood inside the room, tiny, still. The child, not flickering now, not distorted, but solid, real. Their eyes lifted to meet the traveler's, filled not with malice, but with longing, deep, aching longing. Tears glimmered along the child's cheeks as they whispered, "You were supposed to stay."